Hello guys, with this guide I'll cover all Saber heroes and some general dueling techniques, like for instance jump swings and how you can use them more effectively. Let's start with Luke. So at this point, this is my favorite star card loadout with Luke. Rush Immunity gives you an extra dash attack which can come in really handy, whilst Jedi Reflexes gives you 15% damage reduction while and until 3 seconds after the ability. And now since you have 3 dash attacks, you'll probably be using dash attacks a lot, which means you'll also have damage reduction most of the time. And Intensify is nice because it increases your Saber damage until a maximum is reached just by dealing damage, and trust me, this is also useful in Hero Showdown. Now another great star card is Epicenter since it deals 40 damage through block, which can be really nice to finish up low health opponents, or just cancel health regen in general. Now let's take a look at some of the good combos Luke has to offer. So you probably knew you could do parry and then follow up with dash attack, however with a bit of luck you can actually make this to a 4-hit combo. So to do this, parry, follow up with dash attack, make the dash attack connect twice, then follow up with another hit in your opponent's back. And the way you make your dash attack connect twice is, according to Ahsoka, just keep your reticle on your opponent. However, I seem to fail to do that consistently. Another good combo with Luke is push, launch and then 2 hits. And with Luke this is extremely easy, you simply just press the attack button twice right after push to lock after your opponent. It's even easier with Luke than with Obi-Wan in my opinion. Another great thing about Luke is that you can use push mid-air, which means you can kind of do a jump attack with push, and often even get a follow-up hit. Luke also has some good jump attack combos. You can for instance do a jump attack plus push, and then follow up with a launch combo. Or jump attack and follow up with dash attack, or even jump attack and follow up with repulse. For more details about jump swing combos like this in general, I'd really recommend to watch Royalty Free Name's jump swing tutorial. I'll link it down in the description and probably in the info box as well. With Luke you can also use this dash attack to break through blocks, either by doing it from inside your opponent, or by just turning your camera like this. But at least for me this is pretty hard to get working consistently, which might just be the reason pretty much no one is using this. Something you can do that actually works consistently is dodging behind your opponent, then activate dash attack. Okay, let's continue with Rey. So for Rey I use this loadout. Balance gives you 3 dodges on the cost of some stamina drain, which is definitely worth it. Damage strike just adds up dash strike damage, which also is a good thing, and it already applies on the first hit, so don't hesitate using it in Hero Showdown as well. And Focus Sight just increases insight duration, which is definitely good since insight gives you 50% more stamina, and increases your Saber damage by 10, in addition to being able to see your enemies through walls. My favorite combo with Rey is jump swing into dash strike into 2 follow-up swings, and it's technically even better than the parry dash strike combo, which we'll get to in a bit, since you don't have to wait for your opponent to attack you, and you deal more damage since you hit your opponents in the back. Your jump swings need to be really precise to be able to pull this off though, since if you jump too high or too far it won't work. Our next combo is the parry dash strike combo, which is basically, as the name suggests, parry into dash strike and then the follow-up swings. Another good way of using dash strike is to get your camera behind your opponent's back and thereby break their block. Rey can actually also parry with Mind Trick, which is good since you don't expose yourself as much. Just be careful to not fail the timing, cause if you do, it's pretty likely you'll get hit twice. And last but not least, you can also dash strike into jump swing, but keep in mind most people will probably expect it at this point. For a full in-depth Rey guide, feel free to check out my 100 subscriber special if you don't mind the cringe. I'll probably link it in the video description. Okay, let's continue with Yoda. For Yoda I use this loadout. Opposing the dark side just permanently increases your Saber damage. Size matters not, allows you to heal 60 extra HP, in addition to your base health regen every time you use presence. And agility just gives you an extra dash attack. Okay, let's quickly go through some of the things you can do with Yoda. Activating presence while jumping will skip the long animation. You can use presence to free yourself from freezes, stuns or choke, so sometimes it might be a really good idea to save the ability for such cases. The first swing after dash attack has an extremely long lock-on range, which can be really useful, for instance after push, to get to your opponent quickly and deal some damage before they get up. The first swing after dash attack also goes through block if the dash attack also went through block. You can of course also parry with dash attack, which can be useful in some situations, but I think in most cases there are better use cases. Be really careful with Yoda's block, since it is literally garbage, and shit like in this clip is not a rare thing with Yoda, but at least you can charge up your push through blocking. Blaster Fire will charge it up temporarily, whilst Force abilities will charge it up until you use it. Also, Yoda can block Palpatine's default attacks without losing stamina, which makes him a really strong counter for Palpatine. If used correctly, Yoda can be extremely overpowered, but you have to be really careful with your timings, since messing up a timing can easily get you killed with Yoda's slow animations. Also, jump swings are actually way quicker than Yoda's normal attack animation, so it can be less risky going for jump swings than normal swings with Yoda. Also keep in mind that Dooku's exposed weakness completely removes all presence effects, including bonus HP. Let's move on with Anakin. So for Anakin I like to use Tenacious, Attraction and Massive Strikes, but I sometimes like to change Tenacious with either Raw Strength or the other Heroic Might card that increases its radius. With Anakin you need to be a bit careful with how you use your abilities, since using them wrong can get yourself killed pretty quickly. I mean, that's the case with most heroes in Battlefront 2, but especially with Anakin. Also, Anakin is one of the strongest heroes when it comes to chaining your abilities, so you really don't want to waste them. Let's start with Passionate Strike. The way I recommend using Passionate Strike is either to lock after your opponents, break their blocks and cancel their health regen if needed, or finish them off. Just like Yoda's dash attack, Passionate Strike also tracks dodges, so if your opponent is close to you and dodging away, you can use it to lock after them. This is extremely useful if they are one hit and trying to get away. However, if your opponent isn't one hit, then he's a good player, you'll probably get hit twice in return. So in that case, you really need to think about if it's worth it. Another way of using it is as a follow-up after a normal attack, but the safest way is probably to parry with it. You can use Heroic Might to counter normal Saber swings, just don't do this when you're on low HP since you'll probably get hit. But if Heroic Might connects and you chain it into pull, you'll definitely win the trade. If you're playing against Kylo, you really want to save Heroic Might for Frenzy, since you can deal a lot of damage when countering Frenzy with Heroic Might. To get the most damage out of it, you can parry the first Frenzy hit and then do Heroic Might. But keep in mind that if you fail the timing here, Kylo might be able to block your Heroic Might and even parry it. If you manage to get Retribution, try to chain it with your other abilities to get the most out of it. I see so many people just using it randomly and they barely even take regen with it. A really fun combo with Anakin is jump hit into Heroic Might, into pull, then one swing and Passionate Strike. Heroic Might after jump swing is usually only working if they attack you after you jump swing them though. And you have to get pretty lucky for both Passionate Strike hits to connect at the end. Now, some people are often asking how to deal with Anakin's low stamina, and I mean his stamina isn't even that bad, but it just takes a lot of time to regen. Anyways, if you're running out of stamina, you can of course just back off a bit, at least if your opponents don't have ranged abilities ready. If they have, you can of course try to go for one of your own ability combos, which should give you time to regen. In a worst case scenario, you can of course just hold Heroic Might and take advantage of the 90% damage reduction and knockdown immunity. But I mean, you also have dodges, which would probably be the best way to avoid your enemy's ranged abilities. Let's move on with Obi-Wan. So for Obi-Wan I recommend using this loadout. Jedi Resilience increases your health regen by a lot, Forward just increases defensive rush damage, and Quickened Focus makes you charge up your push faster. Defensive Rush makes you immune to normal Saber attacks, but not to abilities, so using Mind Trick before Defensive Rush is often a good idea, since that makes you pretty much invincible for the time being. Just keep in mind that if your opponent is ragdolled or gets ragdolled while being Mind Tricked, the Mind Trick won't actually prevent them from using their abilities. Which is why you should never ever use Mind Trick on a person that is currently knocked down. The same thing can also happen if you Mind Trick either Maul or Grievous while they use one of their abilities. The Mind Trick restrictions might not actually apply. So always have that in mind with Obi's Mind Trick. You can use Defensive Rush multiple times in a row without having to wait for the cooldown. To do this you have to cancel the ability with a final swing, and then simply press the ability button again right after the final swing finishes. And if you time this 100% correctly, you get a full length second rush. And you technically can repeat this step over and over again. But don't worry, this isn't as broken as it seems, because timing this correctly is pretty hard, and also after the first rush you don't have the Saber attack immunity anymore, so you can technically just get spammed down while being in the second defensive rush, which is why it is actually not worth going for in most cases, in my opinion. However, if you slightly fail the timing, the second rush will stop almost immediately, but it's still enough to pretty much double the damage. So this second short rush is actually pretty useful. Just like with Luke, you can also launch after using push. The timing here is slightly harder than with Luke, but with some practice it shouldn't be a problem. A really strong combo with Obi-Wan could for instance be jump swing into push and then launch. Oh, and before I forget it, just like Rey, Obi-Wan can also parry with Mind Trick. Let's go on with Maul. For Maul I use Lightsaber defense, flow motion and accelerated throw. And now, this is really important. I know the card description says 15% damage reduction from blaster fire, and it seems this card also gives these permanent 15% blaster fire damage reduction, but what the card description doesn't say anything about is that this card actually also gives 60% normal damage reduction during spin attack. So this is actually Maul's best card in my opinion. Flow motion just gives you an extra spin attack, which is useful, and accelerated throw increases your saber throw damage. You can break blocks with the returning saber throw hit, and if you time this right with choke, you can technically choke through block. After chokehold, you can use spin attack to get closer to your opponent again, and maybe even hit them before they get up again. And you can often get a quick hit right after spin attack. However, if you're close enough to your opponent while using chokehold, you can actually launch after your opponent. This is not as easy as with Luke or Obi-Wan though. There are players who manage to do this pretty consistently though. Just like with many other abilities, you can also parry with chokehold. However, it seems this can also lead to choke being cancelled, which means you will lose your choke, but your opponent won't get choked. At least your choke animation gets skipped as well though, so you don't really expose yourself too much. You can actually also use choke when being slightly in the air, and at least some opponents don't expect this. You can throw your saber after your opponents when choking them. This is a bit easier to do when you use the ranged throw card. With this card you can even get both saber throw hits out of it, but I don't really like using this card since it makes Maul way more vulnerable every time when you use saber throw. And doing this also works fine without the card, but you might have to walk a bit in the throw direction before throwing your saber. And you're also unlikely to get 2 hits out of this without using ranged throw. And I would say there are easier and more effective combos with Maul anyways. You can parry with spin attack, but another great way of using it is as follow-up after a normal attack or a jump swing. And in an ideal case, you would even get a double hit out of the spin attack. Spin attack is also a perfect counter for Rey's dash strike and Obi-Wan's defensive rush, at least if you aren't mind tricked. So to counter them, just use spin attack right after they connect with your block. So pretty much just a parry with spin attack. And even if Rey hits you with dash strike, you'll get yeeted so far away that she won't be able to hit you again before you get up again. And since Maul's spin attack is very similar to Luke's dash attack, many of the things that can be done with dash attack can also be done with spin attack. Like for instance bypassing your opponent's block by dodging behind them and then activating spin attack. Or just by running inside of them and then activating spin attack. I'm pretty sure you can also break blocks directly with spin attack, since it also can connect twice. But since this was hard enough to do with Luke and unrealistic to pull off in a duel anyways, I didn't really bother to test it with spin attack. Also keep in mind that if you get hit by restrictive mind trick during an ability as Maul, the mind trick most likely won't prevent you from using further abilities. You'll still have this dizzy effect and the sound effect though. And again, same goes for when you get ragdolled. Our next one is Kylo. For Kylo I currently use this loadout. I actually also used to use closing in, because I thought it would be easier to do 4-hit frenzy with it, but 4-hit frenzy works fine without. With Kylo, one of the most basic combos would probably be freeze, jump swing and then follow-up swing. You can often get 2 hits out of freeze anyways though, but with a jump swing it's a bit faster. Another thing that works nice is doing a jump swing after the last frenzy hit, or for instance parry into frenzy. Just keep in mind that for most light side heroes frenzy is extremely easy to counter, and if that happens you'll probably be the one losing way more HP. Rey can counter frenzy with dash strike and even pull the parry dash strike combo, and don't get hit a single time while doing so. Anakin can for instance counter it with heroic might and even push. Luke can counter it with push and repulse, and even parry it with dash attack without getting hit. Yoda can as well counter it with push or dash attack, and Obi-Wan can straight up just spam during the entire frenzy and still not lose regen. But he can also counter it with push. So if you're playing with Kylo against a somewhat capable opponent and they have one of these abilities ready, don't use frenzy. Unless maybe they are Anakin or Luke and they are one hit. And even if they don't have any abilities ready, as long as they aren't low on HP, they can just spam you while you use frenzy, so if you're low on HP, don't use frenzy. In general, frenzy can be an extremely powerful ability, but just keep in mind there are countless ways of countering it, and in many of the counters, Kylo's the one losing the most HP. You can even dodge the block breaking frenzy hit by dodging backwards after the first frenzy hit connects with your block. A normal frenzy has 3 attacks, the first through blockable and the last one goes through block. However, there are multiple ways to trigger a 4-hit frenzy where the last 2 go through block. To do this, simply activate frenzy mid-dodge by double tapping the frenzy button and turn your camera away from your target. I usually do it by dodging backwards, spamming the frenzy button and turning my camera to the right. But there are multiple ways of doing this of course. It even works with jumping. And now for all of those complaining about this being a broken exploit, just keep in mind how easy it is to actually counter frenzy, and 4-hit frenzy doesn't really make it harder to counter frenzy. Let's be real here. And the argument that it is unfair to people who are new and don't know how to duel is just as stupid, since obviously you will have an unfair advantage over new people if you're an experienced player. 4-hit frenzy won't really change much here. You can use pull and freeze midair, and bait your opponent by jumping away, then turning around and pull or freeze them. Keep in mind many people won't really fall for this anymore though. Now it's time for Dooku. For Dooku, I use Last Second, Civ Control and Finesse. Civ Control increases Dooku's health regen, Finesse gives him more stamina, and Last Seconds decreases the cooldown for stun. Another great card would be Initiative, which I would change with Last Seconds, in case you want to use it. It allows you to make one of your swings deal even more damage every 15 seconds. The combination of Dooku's damage output and swing speed makes him extremely dangerous, and the fact that he has one of the highest regens in the game and 3 dodges by default is just stupid, since it makes him really hard to kill, and he can literally kill you in one combo. So to do Dooku's probably strongest combo, activate both buffs, jump swing, stun, and 2 swings, and your opponent is most likely dead, unless he's Anakin who has more health or he's buffed. Another strong combo would be parry, stun, and then 2 hits, but it's not as strong since you don't get the back damage. Yeah, I think this pretty much covers Dooku. Let's move on with Greivous. For Greivous I often use Beating Hard, Civ Train and Flesh is cheap. Beating Hard increases your health regen amount, Civ Train increases your Saber damage on the cost of some stamina, and Flesh is cheap gives you more damage reduction the lower your health gets, which is pretty cheap. Another good card, which is actually essential in large scale, would be Line Up Weaklings, which increases your Claw Rush damage. And if you just want to be safe while using Claw Rush, you can use Cowardly Retreat, which gives you 90% damage reduction while using Claw Rush, which is pretty much being invincible. Using Thrust Touch in a normal way is a free ticket to get double parried and lose a lot of HP. Although, if you activate it while dodging back and turning your camera to the right or left, you can bypass your opponent's block with it. However, they can just counter this by turning in the same direction you do, and you probably end up getting parried just as usual. I mean, you can make it a bit harder for your opponent to see which direction you're coming from by turning more than 180 degrees, but your opponent should still have time to adjust his block direction. But this is also dodgeable. If you press the Thrust Touch button immediately after the attack button, and your Thrust Touch is ready and you have a target, you can use this to launch towards your opponent. This seems a bit unreliable though, and in some cases it actually triggers a Thrust Touch afterwards, which is not ideal. If your Thrust Touch is ready and you have a target for it, and you try to use it mid-air, it will just trigger a normal jump attack. And this jump attack will take stamina, however, it will still work even if you don't have stamina. If you have successfully knocked someone with Thrust Touch, you can do some quick jump attacks as follow-up to deal as much damage as possible. If your opponent gets thrown further away though, you should probably go for Claw Rush. You can kind of counter people with just parry or Thrust Touch by spamming Claw Rush right after Thrust Touch. However, the better option is probably to not use Thrust Touch and try to use Claw Rush as follow-up after a normal attack, parry or jump attack, or just parry with Claw Rush itself. Greivous is really good for jump attacks, since his jump attacks and follow-ups are really fast, and especially with Civ Train they deal a lot of damage. And if you want to just spam jump attacks with Greivous, holding block while doing it will allow you to do it even faster. I recommend to not use Unrelenting Advance, since it leaves you really vulnerable to jump attacks and even dash attacks. However, it works great against Anakin's Heroic Might or Retribution. Now, before I forget it, you can also hit twice with Claw Rush, and this is especially useful against blasters. Now, last on the list we have Vader. However, he's just so fucking broken, and I really can't handle more Vader mains out there, so fuck this. And I mean, I barely ever play him in serious duels anyways, and I just can't really take the character seriously, so yeah, fuck this.
But Reysious, you said you would cover all Saber characters.
Fine, you'll get my cheap Starcard loadout for him. Here it is. And I mean, if many of you actually really want a Vader guide from me, I'll consider actually making one. But for now, let's get to the good stuff. How you can use jump attacks more effectively. So when I'm talking about jump attack or jump swing, I mean jumping slightly at the side or through your opponent, turn around and hit him in the back, and thereby bypass his block. Now, I made a very basic guide a while ago about how to jump attack, so if you're new to jump attacking or you really struggle with it, consider watching that one as well. But now that you know how to jump attack, what do you do if your opponent just keeps dodging when you try to jump attack? One thing you can do is trying to bait your opponent into wasting their dodges, or simply just wait until they've used both dodges, and then jump attack. One way of doing this would be just walking towards your opponent and pretend like you would jump attack, but what I actually like to do is trying to predict where my opponent is going to dodge. So what you do is simply just jumping to that point where you think your opponent will end up after his dodge. Keep in mind that if your opponent knows what he's doing, he'll probably try to adapt to this and make it harder for you to predict him or her. And also keep in mind this won't work equally good on every opponent. Like some people have an extremely readable dodge pattern and it will be really easy to predict them, whilst others are just dodging the most random ways. But you can of course also just gamble with this. I mean, there's always a chance your opponent will dodge into your jump attack. I also promised some people to give some tips on how to counter Blaster with Saber. So usually what you want to do is try to get close to them, try not to spam them, but try to time your attacks with the ending of their dodges. And to avoid stun abilities like Aiden's stun or Chewie's stun grenade, you can try to dodge them, however, especially with Chewie's stun grenade, dodges often seem to not work on that. So other things you can do to avoid this is jumping, or if you have one ready, use an ability that gives you knockdown immunity and damage reduction. Like for instance Heroic Might or Obi's Push. Although you have to watch out when using Obi's Push, since if you do it too late, you can still get stunned. Anyways, in most cases, the safest way to avoiding stun is probably jumping, since dodging this is often hard to time or it doesn't work at all. Also keep in mind that if you're trying to dodge this, you should dodge at least twice. Damage reduction giving abilities can for instance also be good against something like Bosk Mines. Also something that can be good to know is that Maul Spin can deflect blaster bolts. You can parry Blaster's melee attacks and also Phasma stuff. Also dodging sideways seems safer than dodging forwards or backwards against blasters. Also, just like in Saber duels, try to have your opponent's abilities in mind. Like as an example, as Dooku vs Han, you can save your stun for his shoulder charge. Now a few very basic dueling tips for the end, which is more for the newer players I guess. Always keep track of your health and how much you will be able to regen, and always try to lose as little regen as possible if you can. For instance, Obi-Wan, Dooku and Greivous have extremely high health regen, so it's not a big problem for them if they take a big hit, since they can just regen. Whilst for instance Luke would be kinda fucked, since he can only regen 200 HP. In return, he regens way faster than others though, but that really doesn't help him if he gets caught in a combo that takes him a lot of HP. The average health regen amount is 250 HP. Always try to keep track of yours and your opponent's abilities, to ensure to not get hit by their abilities, or know if they have something to counter you. For instance, don't use Frenzy if you're fighting a raid that has Dash Strike ready. Okay, I think that was pretty much everything. I hope I could help some people out with this. Also, special thanks to Call to the Light, Dr. Krat and Ice Lushy for helping me gathering clips for this video. And with that being said, thank you for watching and see you on the next one. Bye.